For 7 long months, there was just silence. In the chaotic, deafening world of WWE, 7 months is an eternity. It's long enough for a career to be forgotten, long enough for the whispers to turn from, "When is he coming back?" to, "Do you remember?" The WWE Universe waited. No one knew if he'd ever return. And then Monday Night Raw happened. When that music hit, a sound we hadn't heard in 210 days. The entire arena. It didn't just cheer. It exploded. Tyler Bate is back. But something is different. He looks stronger, sharper. There's a new danger in his eyes. This wasn't just a comeback. This was a statement. You are about to witness the return that shook Raw to its absolute core. Let's find out what this really means. 7 months. Let's really think about that. It's more than half a year. In the wrestling business, it is a lifetime. The machine, as they say, never stops. Champions rise, legends fall. New faces appear, new storylines are woven. And while all this happens, a name, a once bright star, begins to fade. Tyler Bate, the prodigy, the first ever UK champion. He wasn't just gone from the ring, he was gone from the conversation. The weekly television show doesn't have time to mourn the absent. It builds new heroes. For those 7 months, his fans were left with nothing but old clips and fading memories. The silence was deafening. Every time a surprise entrant was rumored for a show, his name would flicker across the message boards, and then fade again. This is the true dread of a superstar's absence. It's not the injury, if that's what it was. It's the irrelevance. It's the cold, creeping fear that the world will simply learn to live without you. That the show, the one you gave your life to, will go on perfectly fine. The posters get smaller. The merchandise moves to the clearance rack. The silence grows. He wasn't just healing. He was, in the narrative sense, disappearing. And he knew it. Every single day, he knew it. This wasn't a vacation. This was a quiet, private exile. He was on the outside, looking in, wondering if the door would ever open again, or if he'd just become another trivia question. And then, Raw. It was a standard segment. A champion in the ring, arrogant, holding his title high, microphone in hand. He was issuing an open challenge, but it felt rhetorical. A formality. The crowd was listening, but they weren't expecting anything. The roster was accounted for. The stage was set for a predictable response. The champion smirked. And then the lights went out. A collective, sharp intake of breath. The entire arena plunged into darkness. It was only for a second, but it was long enough to reset everything. When they came back up, that sound, the opening riff, a sound that hadn't been heard in 210 days. It wasn't just music. It was an answer. For a split second, there was pure, stunned confusion. Is that? It can't be. And then the name hit the Titantron. Tyler Bate. The sound that came from the crowd wasn't a cheer. It was a release. It was 7 months of frustration, hope, and waiting, all exploding in a single visceral roar. It was a physical wall of sound that shook the cameras. People were grabbing their heads, jumping out of their seats. The champion in the ring. His arrogance evaporated. It was replaced by pure, unadulterated shock. He was back. Not in a rumor, not in a vignette. He was here. The silence was broken, shattered into a million pieces. The man who had disappeared was suddenly the only thing in the world that mattered. Let's talk about that sound from the crowd again. It wasn't just hype. It was relief. In that audience, there were people who had followed his entire journey. They remembered the young prodigy in the UK tournament, the history he made. They remembered his unique style, the impossible strength, the infectious charisma. To them, his absence wasn't just a missing superstar, it was a missing feeling. The show felt less joyful, perhaps less authentic without him. These fans had spent those 7 months defending his legacy online, posting "miss him" on social media, holding on to the hope that he wasn't finished. They were the ones who kept the flicker alive while the machine tried to move on. And in that one moment, when his music hit, they were validated. Their hope was rewarded. You could see it in the fan cams. Tears. Genuine tears. People hugging strangers. Hands thrown in the air, not in celebration but in a kind of thankful surrender. He's okay. He's back. For them, this was the return of a hero who felt like their own discovery. He wasn't a product of the main roster machine. He was an import, a special talent they had championed. The explosion of noise was the sound of thousands of people shouting, "We told you he was special, we waited, and he's finally home." It was a shared, communal experience that transcended the scripted show. It was a real, human moment of profound relief. The shock wasn't just that he was back, it was that his return felt like this. It felt like a piece of the puzzle, long thought lost, had just been slammed back into place. He didn't stop on the ramp to soak it in. He didn't smile. He didn't wave. The man who walked down that ramp was not the man who had left. The familiar mustache was there, but the eyes were different. They were cold, focused. He walked with a purpose that bordered on aggression. This wasn't a return. It was an invasion. The champion in the ring, who had been so confident moments before, was now desperately trying to regain his composure. He held his title up, shouting, "This is my ring." But the words were hollow. Tyler Bate didn't even look at the championship. He looked through the champion. He methodically unzipped his jacket, threw it down, and rolled his shoulders. The crowd, sensing this new energy, grew quiet. The joyous roar faded into a tense, curious hum. What was this? He stepped into the ring. No microphone, no words. He just stood there, staring. The champion tried to posture, to push him. Tyler didn't flinch. And then it happened. A single, lightning-fast move, a spinning, explosive lariat that turned the champion inside out. The sound of the impact echoed through the stunned arena. He didn't go for a pin. He didn't posture. He just stood over the fallen champion, his chest out, his breathing steady. That was the statement. It wasn't for the fans. It wasn't for the cameras. It was for the entire locker room. The prodigy was gone. The big, strong boy was a memory. Whatever took him away for 7 months had forged him into something dangerous. Imagine the chaos in the gorilla position. That's the small, high-stress area right behind the curtain where the producers and the boss watch the show. They live by a script. Every second is timed. Every cue is planned. Then, Tyler Bates' music hits. If this wasn't planned, it's the single greatest breach of security in the show's history. But let's assume it was planned, but kept secret from almost everyone. The producers are watching their monitors and they see the crowd reaction. They see the viewing numbers spike online in real time. They hear the genuine, unscripted shock. In that instant, all their other plans for the night, they suddenly feel small. The main event they had been building for 3 weeks, it just became the second most important thing that happened tonight. The producer in charge is screaming into his headset. Get a camera on his face. Follow him. Stay on the champion. They are rewriting the rest of the show live. This one man's return has thrown the entire creative direction of the brand into a blender. This is the beautiful, terrifying nature of a perfect comeback. It's a goldmine, but it's also a logistical nightmare. What about the superstar who was supposed to answer the open challenge? He's now standing backstage, his gear on, his moment stolen. The hierarchy has been violently reshuffled. The producers are ecstatic, terrified, and electric. They just found their new headliner. But now, they have to figure out what to do with him and how to manage the fallout from the stars he just eclipsed. As Tyler Bate walked back through that curtain, the atmosphere in the locker room would have been thick enough to cut with a knife. This isn't like the movies. Not everyone is clapping. The superstars are watching on monitors. The second his music hit, every head turned. First, the shock. He's back? Tonight? Then, the analysis. They watched how he walked. They saw the new look in his eyes. They saw him destroy the champion. And the entire emotional landscape of that room shifted. His friends, the ones who knew his struggle, would be the first to greet him, with genuine, relieved hugs. They knew what he'd been through. But for everyone else, it's complicated. For the mid-carders, the ones fighting for a few minutes of TV time, a new, top-tier star just jumped the line. That's one less spot. For the main eventers, the ones he's clearly targeting, it's a new threat, a dangerous, unpredictable variable. They aren't just happy to see him, they're sizing him up. Is he better than before? Is he a threat to my title? The Whisper Network ignites. He looks different. Heard he was training in isolation. He's not playing that strong boy gimmick anymore. His return isn't a celebration for them. It's a new day at the office with a new, hungry competitor. The respect is there. He's a prodigy after all. But it's now mixed with a heavy dose of professional anxiety. He didn't just return to the roster, he just put everyone on notice. Within 60 seconds, he was the #1 trend worldwide. Tyler Bate. He's back. Raw. The digital wildfire was instantaneous. Every wrestling journalist, every podcast, every insider scrambled. The first wave was just pure shock. Screenshots of his new, intense look, videos of the crowd explosion. But the second wave, that was the speculation. Why was he gone for 7 months? The silence, once a mystery, was now a vacuum that demanded to be filled. Sources say it was a private, undisclosed injury. No, I'm hearing it was creative dissatisfaction. He went away to reinvent himself. My source says he was on a deep personal leave, completely cut off. This is the part of the story where the man, Tyler, gets lost, and the idea of him takes over. The media frenzy builds an expectation that is almost impossible to meet. He can't just be good anymore. He has to be transcendent. He has to justify 7 months of silence and a return that broke the internet. The fans, now high on the moment, are already fantasy booking him into the main event of the next pay-per-view. The pressure is immense. He didn't just return to the ring. He returned to a million different storylines that the fans and media had already written for him. His every move will now be analyzed, every promo dissected, every match rated against the impossible hype of his own return. The shock of the comeback was the easy part. The hard part is living up to it, starting tomorrow. We have to remember who Tyler Bate was. He was the founding father of the UK brand. The first champion. A prodigy who was a polished, main event-ready star while still practically a kid. That's a heavy, heavy legacy. When you're a prodigy, you're not allowed to just be good. You're expected to be great every single night. His 7-month absence didn't just pause his career, it froze that legacy in amber. Fans weren't remembering his last few matches. They were remembering the idea of him. The best of real. The 5-star classics. Now, he has to return and compete against the ghost of his own potential. That's a burden most can't understand. The man who returned to Raw isn't just fighting the current champion. He's fighting the 20-year-old version of himself who set the world on fire. This new, dangerous demeanor. Maybe it's not just a gimmick. Maybe it's a defense. A way to protect himself from the expectation of being that smiling, joyful, big, strong boy again. He can't be that person, because that person's legacy is too perfect, too pristine. He had to kill that version of himself to have any chance of moving forward. The shock of his return is quickly replaced by a profound, unspoken question. Can he be better than the legend he already created? The pressure isn't just to win matches. The pressure is to not disappoint the memory of his own past. He's not just back for a title. He's back to prove that his first act wasn't a fluke. So, what really happened in those 210 days? The truth is always quieter than the speculation. It wasn't just a physical injury. It wasn't a dramatic contract dispute. It was a loss of self. When you do something at an elite level since you were a teenager, your identity becomes fused with your profession. Tyler Bate was wrestling. So, when a nagging injury, compounded by burnout, forced him to step away, the machine didn't just pause. He did. The silence wasn't just an absence from TV, it was a deafening quiet in his own life. The adrenaline was gone. The crowds were gone. The structure was gone. The first month was a relief. The second was a recovery. But the third, fourth, and fifth, that was the void. He had to wake up every day and not be Tyler Bate, the superstar. He had to be Tyler, the man. He had to confront the question, if I'm not a wrestler, who am I? This is the journey no one sees. The quiet mornings, the therapy sessions, the long walks trying to reconnect with the world he had only ever seen through the window of a tour bus. He wasn't just healing his body, he was rebuilding his entire identity. The man who returned wasn't stronger because he lifted more weights. He was sharper because he had been broken down to his core and had to relearn why he wanted to do this in the first place. He had to find a reason to come back that wasn't just about the money or the fame. The cameras are off. The crowd is gone. The champion he attacked has been helped to the back. Tyler Bate is alone in the locker room. The adrenaline is fading, and for the first time, he catches his reflection in a mirror. He's breathing hard. He's back. He did it. The return was a shock to the world. The attack was a statement to the locker room. But as he stands there, he realizes the truth. The entire night, it wasn't for them. It wasn't for the fans, or the producers, or the champion. It was for the man he was for the last 7 months. The man who was lost, the man who was forgotten, the man who wondered if he still had it. The new, cold, dangerous demeanor wasn't just an act for the camera. It was the armor he had to build to protect the part of him that was still fragile. The part that was terrified the music would hit and no one would remember. Or worse, no one would care. The triumphant return, the explosion of the crowd, the destruction of the champion, it was all a desperate, violent act of self-affirmation. He wasn't just telling the world he was back, he was telling himself. The shockwave on Raw wasn't the return of a superstar. It was the rebirth of a man. And the truth is, he's more terrified now than he was when he was sitting at home, because now he has to do it all over again. The comeback is over. The fight has just begun. The statement wasn't, "I'm back." The statement was, "I am."